So Afghanistan now claims within 15 minutes of its action inside Pakistani territory, Pakistan desperately reached out to Saudi Arabia and Qatar to seek an immediate ceasefire. Apparently, a ceasefire is being put in place for the next 48 hours. The question remains, will Afghanistan follow that ceasefire after children have been targeted in Kandahar? Remember, Pakistan, after that October 11 airstrikes and the drone strikes in Kabul, has carried out fresh drone strikes and artillery attacks on the other side of the border. They've targeted Afghanistan army garrisons, they've targeted armored personal carriers and US-made Humvees carrying Taliban commanders. But what is worse, information that's just coming out, is that children were targeted in a building that was targeted had children in it, and apparently there's been some loss of life. This clearly goes far beyond regular skirmishes. Is it escalating into a conflict? And can Pakistan afford tensions on so many fronts? Joining me on this India Today special broadcast is Sushant Sareen, a strategic affairs analyst and a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, on what's happening in this region. Also with us is Professor Raghav Sharma, Professor and Director for Center for Afghan Studies at the School of International Affairs at O.P. Jindal Global University. Sushant, what is your reading of this escalation that is suddenly taking place along the AFPAC border?
Well, I think the provocation came clearly from the Pakistani side. The fact that they went and bombed Kabul meant that the Taliban were going to retaliate. And then, you get into a kind of an escalation spiral. As long as the Pakistanis were bombing some remote border areas, the Afghans were kind of brushing it aside. But you can't be going and bombing the capital city of Afghanistan and then expect that the Taliban are going to keep quiet. Interestingly, what is happening is that all these Pakistani complaints which they are, making, I think they're rather funny and if not entirely disingenuous, because these are exactly the things that Pakistan has been accused of doing. And now they're accusing the Taliban of doing it. So from the Taliban point of view, they've been trying to play down many of the issues bedeviling their relationship with the Pakistanis. But the Pakistanis are constantly upping the ante. And now if you hear what is happening in the Pakistani, mind space, they are now starting to talk about regime change in Afghanistan, which means that they are now plotting to either, inflict yet another civil war in Afghanistan. I don't know how that will work out. Who are the people who are going to play a role in that? But it will cause even more death and devastation in Afghanistan. And of course, there will be a pushback from the Afghan side, from the Taliban side, who have a fairly big constituency thanks to the myopia of the Pakistani Punjabis who encourage this culture. There is a huge constituency which is pro-Taliban inside Pakistan. So this
and
is
not just restricted to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But I'll just come to the response, the retaliation in a moment, Sushant. I want to understand the current escalation. Professor Sharma, Pakistan is a nuclear weapons state. It has a professional armed forces, army, navy and air force. And you saw that video that's been put out by Zabiullah Mujahid, the spokesperson of the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan, that Afghanistan troops went inside Pakistan, they killed soldiers, and they came back with war booty, including a tank. What do you make of that? Is this psychological warfare, or does this show that Pakistan's morale is really down in that border belt?
Well, this has truly proved to be a Pyrrhic victory for Pakistan, the Taliban's return. And clearly, what this does demonstrate is the fact that morale in the Pakistani army is very low. And Pakistan's actions in Afghanistan have only reinforced its unpopularity within Afghanistan. And clearly, it shows there is a crisis brewing within the Pakistan army. Its whole project of, promoting radicalization it's a classic case of chickens having come home to roost, so to speak. So what it does underscore is that there is a serious internal crisis brewing within Pakistan, and we do not fully know the scale of that crisis. So the fact that a force like the Taliban has been able to stand up and inflict damage on the Pakistanis on such a scale is certainly going to be, a huge cause of embarrassment to the army and to the self-anointed Field Marshal Asim Munir.
this self-anointed Field Marshal Asim Munir, Ambassador Sajjanhar, what is his thinking? First Pahalgam, then Operation Sindoor, then the trouble that he's facing with Tehreek-e-Labbaik, the trouble in Baluchistan, the trouble in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, including Gilgit-Baltistan, and now this escalation with Taliban sending in his fighter jets or drones to bomb Kabul, and I believe there's some bombing that's happening even as we speak in Kandahar, and there are losses of life. But Ambassador Sajjanhar, what is Pakistan up to? Is this part of some wider game as far as pleasing America is concerned, so that America can get the Bagram airbase?
Thank you very much, Gaurav. If it was part of a wider game, then this is a wider game that Pakistan is losing and losing very badly. Because I think it has all really started, meaning all these aspects that you have mentioned about the TTP, about Afghanistan, about Tehreek-e-Labbaik, etc., meaning all that has been happening around, whether it's, discontent in Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, POK, etc. All this has been happening. Asim Munir has been focused much more on his activities, visits, etc., outside the country rather than paying attention to whatever is happening at home. I think basically what has added to all this and given him some sort of an urgency that he has to act is, in my view, the visit also of the Afghan foreign minister to India. That has completely unnerved him, that has completely rattled him, and I think that is what has led to all this ill thought actions that have been taken by bombing Kabul, meaning that is totally, as far as the Taliban is concerned, unpardonable. You mentioned that it's a nuclear weapon state. You don't use nuclear weapons in conventional wars like this. We have seen that in Russia, Ukraine,
Yes.
etc. Russia is a nuclear weapon state, but that has not helped it to sort of, cow down the resistance that has come from Ukraine. As
Okay.
far as it's going to appealing to Qatar and Saudi Arabia, it is exactly a repeat of what has happened on the 10th of May. Because,
Yes.
if Pakistan is saying that it is getting the better of the conflict with the Taliban, why would it go to outside powers seeking for mediation and seeking for help? Because, if it has
And
been
seeking
started by that,
visas repeatedly to get to Kabul, and those visas being denied. Sir, stay with me for a moment. Major General Sanjay Meston, our former defense attaché at Kabul, joins us on this broadcast. General Meston, you've been speaking to people across Afghanistan. Apparently, there is some bombing that's still on, even though Qatar and Saudi Arabia seem to have brokered some kind of a 48-hour-long ceasefire that Pakistan sought. But in case Pakistan is targeting civilian areas in which children are either being injured, God forbid, dying, clearly Afghanistan will be compelled to respond.
Gaurav, good evening. There is no doubt Afghanistan is going to respond in a very, very solid manner. Now, what has happened on ground today, which of course there are unverified reports. First is that Kabul definitely, area has been bombed where I think some multi-story building has collapsed. That is what the inputs are, how reliable they are. One needs verification, which I think the casualties have been heavy. Secondly, there are also unconfirmed reports. I use the word unconfirmed reports about some bombing at Kandahar airfield. Now, nevertheless, I think what is going to happen now in Afghanistan is the people of Afghanistan definitely now will not leave Pakistan. I have no doubts on that because the way Afghans are, they are a very self-respecting people, and all the tribes now, whether even if it's the Tajiks or the Uzbeks or Hazaras. And I've seen this one trailer in 2013, which I mentioned to you other day, in
Yes.
the incident in Ghosta incident, which was in Nangarhar province. The entire Pakistan, Afghans had united.
Okay.
Now, since the casualties have taken place, I think the unified Afghans will now do something which Pakistan will not realize. They will definitely launch a jihad against the Pakistani army. And I think what the assessment is that firstly, yes, Pakistan has a definite advantage on air oblique missile assets, and they have been using it over a period of time, whether it was in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, whether it was in North South Waziristan, all along the both sides of the Durand line, they have been using this at their discretion. No holds, no barred. Now, the advantage which the Afghans have, they have been fighting for over 5 decades now. This is the kind of
Yes.
experience they have. They have dislodged the Russians who were there for almost a decade. They
No,
have
their
sorted
bigger
out the
advantage vis-a-vis Pakistan is Sushant Sareen. They've stayed in Pakistan all through the US being in Afghanistan. So they know the lay of the land. They know where ISI assets are. They know where ISI, safe houses are. And they'll be able to hit them at home harder, firmer, with a bigger response. And will they remain restricted to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or could this fire spread to Pakistan's Punjab, Sushant Sareen?
No, look, I think it's too early to speculate where all the fire will spread. But supposing it catches fire in KP, then of course it will naturally spread to the areas across the Indus River. But Gaurav, you have to understand a couple of things. There will be a lot of tall talk from the Afghan side, from the Pakistani side. But militarily, the Daesh is loaded against Afghanistan, at least insofar as conventional warfare is concerned. So if the Afghans are going to try and fight the Pakistanis in the conventional domain, it'll be a turkey shoot,
Yes.
largely, right? Maybe in some skirmishes they'll get the better of the Pakistanis. But if this is going to be a guerrilla fight, so which means that the Afghans have to fight the Pakistanis on their own pitch, not on the Pakistani pitch. The second and equally important thing is that the Pakistani, will the war be fought inside Afghanistan or will it be fought inside Pakistan? The Pakistanis want that this war should be fought inside Afghanistan without Pakistan going inside Afghanistan, which means primarily by air. The Taliban, however, would want to take the war inside Afghanistan, and it will be a ground kind of an offensive, albeit of a subconventional or an unconventional type, which means that they will bring into play the legions of suicide bombers that they have trained, the kind of light artillery, sorry, light infantry which they have, which is what
TTP
how
would be.
were operating even in the past, IEDs and other kind of stuff, and literally bleed the Pakistanis by 1,000 cuts. So this is not going to be, a 4-day, 5-day, 10-day affair. This will be a long drawn out war of attrition. And do the Pakistanis have the staying power? Right now, they haven't lost enough people. But once they start losing people, that is when they'll realize. One last thing, Gaurav, the Pakistanis, Ambassador Sajjanhar was mentioning, the Pakistanis keep parroting. I'm sick of hearing them. We are a nuclear power. We are a nuclear power. What they don't understand is that they're so hollow from within that it doesn't take much to attack this nuclear power by a
Yes.
determined, committed, and ideologically driven force like the Taliban are. So, frankly, the Pakistanis will show a lot of bravado, typical Punjabi bluster, and say that we are going to go and kick, the backsides of the Afghans. But when the reverse kick comes, I'm not sure that they'll be able to handle it.
Okay. Professor Sharma, you've studied Afghanistan and the Afghan mindset very closely. In your view, if we were to talk about Pashtuns on either side of the Durand line, is this likely to reignite that fire for a greater Pashtunistan? And would that be Pakistan's worst nightmare coming true? Because anyway, Afghanistan does not believe in the Durand line.
Well, if you look at the last 4.5 years since the Taliban have been in power, they've been far more critical of Pakistan and their attempts to fence the entirety of the Durand line than the governments of the Republic. And that is because that is part of the core ideological agenda of the Taliban, which is an ideological movement at the end of the day. There is a certain core constituency that they cater to, and the whole idea of Pashtunistan panders very well to that constituency. And Pakistan in this round, by targeting civilians, apparently there were reports that about 80 civilians have ended up in the hospital in Kandahar alone. They've widened the ambit of conflict. They have reinforced Pakistan's already unpopular standing within Afghan civilians, and this is going to mount pressure on the Taliban to retaliate and retaliate decisively. And as Sushant pointed out, if essentially the conflict widens, the ambit of conflict widens and goes into Pakistan, they are certainly going to have it tough in places like KPK, where the Pak army already has a
Yes.
crisis of legitimacy. And that
And
crisis of
do you see
legitimacy.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, and I'll take that to General Miston in just a moment, do you see Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Baluch Liberation Army and other groups uniting? Because Pakistan's attempt has been to unite Islamic State, ISKP, and bring in Lashkar-e-Taiba to target Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan. So there is some kind of a civil war that Pakistan wants inside Afghanistan, but that's a game the two can play, sir.
No,
Ambassador
absolutely, you're very
Sajjanhar.
right. That was exactly the point that I wanted to come to. That basically, when the Afghan Taliban comes within Pakistan and is fighting a war there, it is not alone. It is also, fighting along with, there are other comrades in arms with it. There is, of course, the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. And, all the others who have been fighting against the Pakistani establishment, against the Pakistan army, against the Pakistan ISI, whether it is the BLA, whether it is in KPK, whether it is Tehreek-e-Labak, whether it is in POK, all of them are going to, find a common cause and, get strength from each other and fight against the Pakistan army. So I think Pakistan is going to have a very difficult, customer on its hands if it tries to do this. And I don't think it'll be really, meaning I take Sushant's point that if they, want to have a contactless sort of a thing from the air fighting, sending aircrafts and missiles, etc. But that it will not be able to sustain for any length of time because
Yes.
Taliban also, I am Gaurav, if you permit, I'll just say one sentence. I'm currently speaking with you from Astana in Kazakhstan. And there is a meeting of all Central Asian countries, and today we've had discussions on Afghanistan. And I can tell you that all of Central Asia is very keen to engage with Afghanistan and willing to work together. They have been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years, and particularly today, they are very keen to do that. And they look upon this conflict with Pakistan with considerable, sense of distaste, but their support for Afghanistan continues to be as strong and as robust,
Okay.
that I have seen today. So this,
Jel
I
Meston,
don't
in
think
your view, is Pakistan doing this to help America get the Bagram air base and, by weakening the Taliban, by trying to engineer some kind of a civil war within Afghanistan between ISKP, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan? And can Afghanistan pay back in the same coin with all these assorted groups, TTP, BLA, now Tehreek-e-Labbaik, perhaps all of them joining hands to take on the Pakistani establishment?
Gaurav, Pakistan's strategy is very clear. One, they definitely want to please President Trump that they will assist and bring pressure on Afghan Taliban to give the Bagram airfield, which will never happen. That is one. Second, their strategy is to use air power and of course missiles, etc., to target the Afghan civilians. But Pakistan does not realize that the Afghans, the kind of experience they have, when the international security assistant force was there in entire Afghanistan and including in the border areas, the US army were launching heavy missile and air force attacks. They were using it
Yes.
at discretion. So what I'm trying to say is the kind of experience now Afghans have, what they will not do. Firstly, all these other groups, whether it is BLA, TTP, and everyone, they will get highly emboldened. Pakistan army now will be committed very badly all along. Now, what will be the strategy of the Afghans? Afghans, they will fritter away into small groups. Now, since we were talking about, the conventional war, the
Yes.
Russian tanks, the way they were hit, the entire invasion coming through the Panjshir Valley, I have seen and gone in those areas where so many tanks were destroyed. How?
Yes.
The network of intelligence was very good. They had very, very small groups who were very well armed with rocket launchers and they destroyed tanks. Next, what the Afghans will do, they will raid the Pakistan isolated small posts. This will demoralize them and this will definitely give an impetus to
Okay.
PLA. So
So
overall, my assessment is
guerrilla warfare, perhaps that happens. The last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show. Sushant Sareen, Pakistan's lit so many fires on so many fronts, and especially the one with Tehreek-e-Labbaik in Pakistan's Punjab province, in Murid-ke, in Lahore. Will Pakistan be able to handle that, given that most of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik leadership has either been neutralized or missing?
Yeah, I think Tehreek-e-Labbaik is a very different nature of conflict that Pakistan faces. It's more of an internal, it has an economic dimension, it has partly a religious dimension. And you have to remember who are these people. These are basically the underclass, the carpenters, the plumbers, the basically the lower middle class lot, which is part of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik. You hardly see anybody from the Punjabi elite being part of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik, so it's easier to crush them. But the Tehreek-e-Labbaik it's unlikely to join hands with somebody like the Taliban because doctrinally they come from completely different schools. I don't think that is going to be possible. But what is important, Gaurav, is the sheer reach that has already been established by the Taliban groups. Somebody earlier spoke about the KP province and how they can light fires in KP. You are forgetting Balochistan. Half of Balochistan is Baloch populated and burning. The other half is
Pashtuns.
Pashtun dominated, and that's also going to get affected. And then you have their presence already established in places like POGB and POJK. So if you look at the kind of footprint they have now started establishing inside Pakistan, you have a real problem on your hands if you're a Pakistani general, especially if you are running a country on the basis of a deeply unpopular regime, which has not been elected, which is not popular, which has been implanted upon the people of Pakistan
Yes.
through a rigged election. You have an army which is extremely unpopular. Maybe some sections of Punjab continue to support it, but by and large, it's extremely unpopular in rest of the country. So
Okay.
you once again that perfect storm which is building up, provided the trajectory of events which they are continue like this. But I don't see
We'll,
this even stop. There might be a temporary pause, but
okay.
eventually it's going to keep erupting every now and then.
The build up to that perfect storm, and we'll be tracking that story very closely. I want to thank all my guests for joining me here